Hello, this is Mr. Fontenot 1111, and I wanted to share something about wire stripping with you here just for a second. Whenever we're doing any kind of technical work, the better our tools are, the better work we're going to be able to do. And you see here I have a variety of different kinds of wire strippers, wire cutters, and we're going to go over that here in just a second. But the point I want to make to you is whenever you're doing any kind of technical work, if you don't have the right tools, can you get by? You probably can get by. But it's going to be frustrating. You don't want to be frustrated when you're doing technical work, first and foremost. And it won't be as enjoyable. And really, to do good work, you have to enjoy your work. And you won't be able to do as good of work. If you think about a brain surgeon, we all know that he's not just getting by with a knife out of the kitchen and doing the best he can. No, he's got 50 different little scalpels. One may look just about like the next one. It's slightly different, but everybody wants him to have all the tools he needs, everything he needs to make him comfortable, because it's very technical. So for us as technicians, we want to have the right tools. So let's look at the tools I have here. First of all, I have a pair of diagonal cutters. These are mini diagonal cutters, and I'll talk to you about them here in a minute. And this is a regular size diagonal cutters, and basically these are used for just cutting a wire off. And these can be used for cutting a wire off too, more specifically for smaller wire. Now this is stranded wire like you would find in an extension cord. You would not want to cut solid wire of any size with these, like Romex. I definitely would not cut Romex with these. Next, we've got a pair of wire strippers here. It also has an area here for crimping, crimp-on connectors or butt connectors, similar to something like this. Crimp this little end on. Or this is what I mean by a butt connector. You stick a wire in each end of this and crimp each end, and you can put two wires together. So it's got a area here, and you can see that it's got some color coding and some numbers to tell you what size to crimp where. Also, it has this area here, which is actually used to cut off small bolts. You just screw it into the correct hole, and you can actually squeeze this and it'll cut the little bolt off. Next, we have a pair of automatic wire strippers, and these are really good for Nomex wire. Solid 14 conductor or 12 conductor American wire gauge size 12 Romex. And then finally, we have some automatic wire strippers here, and I love these wire strippers, and I'm going to demonstrate how they work here in just a second. These are Klein's, and when it comes to tools, name brand really does make a difference. Now, I shop at Harbor Freight. I get tools from Harbor Freight. I've got a side grinder from Harbor Freight. The reason why I got it is because that's a tool I'm going to use once a year. If I was a welder, I wouldn't be able to get by on a side grinder from Harbor Freight. If I was using it every day for 2 or 3 hours, I'd have to go get a good one somewhere. So with our tools here, name brand does make a difference. So let's look at our mini diagonal cutters. The advantage of these is whenever I'm making an extension cord or cutting off a piece of wire like this, what I do not want to do is cut these inner wires here. I don't want to cut, let me say it this way. I don't want to cut the insulation on these inner wires. If I'm trying to strip off some of this outer jacket and I'm trying to strip it back a couple of inches or whatever length I need, while I'm stripping off the outer jacket, I don't want to cut the insulation on my inner conductors. Now, of course, you could take your diagonal cutters and you could cut around it this way. You could take a knife and ring it. If you're very careful, that'll work. But you got to be very careful or you'll cut these inner conductors, the insulation on them, and then if it ever gets wet, you're going to have a short. It's just not a good practice. So what we can do with these mini diagonal cutters here is we can actually go long ways down the wire. So I'm going to stick it in the insulation a little bit here, and I'm making sure that I'm in between those inner conductors, and I'm going to cut, instead of ringing the wire, I'm going to cut long ways down the wire. And typically after you get it started a little bit, you can reach in here and grab one of the conductors, or a lot of times they'll have a little piece of string in there, and you can grab that piece of string, and once you have that piece of string in your hand, you can go ahead and start pulling it, and then you can tear as much of this outer conductor off as you want. But really, if you possibly can, it is best to go long ways, cutting down the insulation this way instead of cutting around it this way. All right, so now that I've got my outer jacket cut off a little bit, we definitely want to clean this up some. So we're gonna get this stuff here out of our way, trim it off. And we want to make sure that everything looks nice and neat, of course. How our work looks is a major reflection on the type of work we do. If our work looks sloppy, people are not going to trust that everything's connected to the right place, that all of the terminations are done as they should be. You don't want to leave behind what they call a bird's nest. Somebody opens the cabinet and there's just a big bird nest of wires, and man, nobody can see where nothing's going. All right, so now I'm down to my inner wires here. This is called SO card, which stands for Safety Card Oil Resistant. And there's a bunch of different kinds of this, of course. This one here you can see is the SJ00W. And it says right here, 3 conductor 14 AWG, which means American wire gauge. So there's 3 in here, number 14 American wire gauges. Now what's unique about this wire, for one thing, it's a stranded conductor, so it's much more flexible. If we compare that to Romex wiring like we have in the walls of our homes, that's a solid conductor, which is much more rigid. Let me show you a piece of that. So here's a piece of Romex. It's actually called, the actual name of it is non-metallic sheathed cable, but we call it Romex because Romex is the #1 manufacturer of this wire. And this is a solid conductor wire. One thing that's very unique and different about our Romex compared to our SO card, if you look at the numbers on a piece of Romex wire, this Romex wire here would say 2/14, where this one said 3/14. So with your Romex, it does not count the ground. Even though there's 3 wires in here, it doesn't count it. So this would be a 2 conductor 14, even though it has 3 wires in it. Back to our SO card here. As I said, it's gonna say 3 conductors, so our SO card does count the ground. Now, looking at our wire strippers here, I love these. I just got these. These are some automatic wire strippers, and you'll notice what I put on the handle here says solid bottom, stranded top. And what that tells me, there's a wire gauge indication on the jaws here, some little numbers that tells us what wire should go where. Kind of hard to make out, but You can see the numbering is different from the top than it is on the bottom. That's because the top is for stranded wire. That's the numbers you go by when you're doing stranded wire. And the bottom is the numbers. The bottom numbers are the numbers you go by when you're doing solid wire. I'm not going to remember that, so I put it on the handles here. Made me a little reference sheet. So we just read that this is number 14 and it's stranded. So I'm going to look at my top numbers and I'm going to find my number 14 on the top here. And I'm going to see how much I want to strip. Get about that much. You can see what happens here. This bottom jaw grabs the wire, pulls it backwards while the front jaw strips it off. So what we see inside of here is a bunch of little bitty small wires. And that's why an extension cord is always more flexible than a piece of Romex, because an extension cord has all these little strands of wire, where a piece of Romex is just one solid piece of wire. Both of these are the same size. Both of these are a number 14, but one of them is a solid conductor and one of them is a stranded conductor. So having these automatic wire strippers here, man, they make life a lot easier. Can I strip it with the other pair? Sure I can, and it ain't too bad. I line up with my number 14 here, and you can see where it says also stranded on this side, and it says solid on this side. So I'm looking for stranded. I found my number 14 on my stranded right here, and I bring my jaws down and I clamp it. But when I try to pull it off, it's not really going to want to come off. It works okay, not too bad. You certainly can get by with these. There's nothing wrong with these. There's another type of these that has the wire stripping area here. I prefer it when the wire stripping's out here, because you can just get to your wire a lot better. When the wire stripping area is here, you got to take your handles and put them over it and get it up in here and strip. Nothing wrong with those. It's just a preference thing. I prefer the kind with the strippers on the end, but I prefer the automatics more than these kind at all. Now, I said that these were really good for Romex, and the way that these work, basically, there's a little dial right here, and when you go clockwise, it's for smaller wire. When you go counterclockwise, it's for larger wire. And this is actually a little wire gauge to determine how much wire, how much insulation you want to strip. So taking my Romex wire here, let me cut this end off. All right, so if I want to strip a certain distance, you can see how it's going until it hits my little wire stripping gauge there. If I want to strip less, I would push this in some. Now it's going to strip much less. Or you can just roll it down out of the way. Now, for stripping Romex wire, you cannot beat these guys. And I think they're pretty new, because I don't remember seeing them in the last, but except for here lately in the last few years. So basically what we're going to do, we're going to take our Romex wire, we're going to lay it in there, determine how much we want to strip, we're going to clamp down, and basically it just pulls it apart. Gets rid of your outer jacket. See, it's not grabbing now. That's because my little thumb screw is too loose. If I screw my thumb screw in some, try it again, it definitely grabs it. So let me strip a little bit off here. Now I'm to my inner conductors, and I need to strip them. And with my inner conductors, I also can strip them with my new type of automatic strippers. I really like these a lot. So that's just a few tips about stripping wire and the types of tools that are available for us. Just wanted to share that with you. Hope it helps you. Mr. Fontenot 1111. I have a bunch of other videos on my YouTube page, Mr. Fontenot 1111. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe.